Hi there, welcome to Coffee Economics. My name is Abe. Today I'm going to be doing my first ever review of economic issues coming out of Africa. Hope you enjoy this series and I hope it will be insightful for you, and let's get into it. So the first story I'm going to look at is coming out of South Africa. So South Africa's central bank has decided to raise its interest rates again to tame inflation. This is the 10th straight hike. This is not just happening in South Africa. As we know, it's happening all over the world, in the Western countries and the Eastern countries as well. The factors are because of the Ukraine-Russia war causing energy and food prices to go up, and also some lingering effects from COVID. What South Africa is trying to do is really good in terms of trying to tame inflation, given that it's already struggling with some other issues around energy, with blackouts happening across the country. The central bank has raised the interest rate to 8.25%. with the hope that as they increase the interest rates, people will decide to save money rather than spend. And also those who have debts like house mortgages or other commercial debts will have less disposable income or money that they can spend to drive the economy. So it kind of slows the economy down, causing people to demand less of goods and services, with the hope that it will put inflation within the benchmark band, which is around the 3 to 6%. I'll just show you this image so you can see this inflation target that they have between 3 and 6%. So South Africa is here at the moment. As you can see, it's trending down, showing that the interest rate policy is working. Hopefully it will keep working and cause that inflation rate to go down so that South Africa can focus on really sort of try and ramp up its economy rather than sort of trying to cause the economy to sort of slow down the inflation rate. So how's South Africa comparing to other countries? Well, it's doing relatively well. If you see here, for the US, they have a target of around 2% for the inflation rate. As you can see, it's around 4.93%. So they're not doing too bad as well. So I think that pretty much South Africa is doing as well as any other country in terms of taming inflation. It's a really tricky one, but I think if they can do it, and if they can do it even faster than the US and these other Western economies, what it will do is signal to other countries that, hey, particularly investors, that hey, South Africa has got a really good central bank and who's managing the economy, the monetary policy of the economy. But there'll still be this looming issue around these blackouts because of the energy issues that are happening in South Africa. So hopefully, taming inflation will be a small win for South Africa, given the context that South Africa is in at the moment. But if they can do it, it will be really good for the economy. Let's move on to the next story. Kenya is facing a really difficult time as well around how it's raising enough revenue and also keeping ahead of its massive debts. So Ruto has just been in president. I don't think it's up to a year yet. Maybe it's just over a year or maybe just under. And he's already feeling a lot of pressure in terms of how to manage the economy and make sure that it doesn't default on its debts. So as you can see, external debt is around $34 billion, which is a huge debt profile. And the repayments are huge as well. So there's issues around the collection of the revenues from the tax agencies around corruption and tax evasion. Kenya has a goal to raise 2.1 trillion shillings, I believe, of revenue to cover its needs for its economy in terms of revenue from taxation. And if it doesn't, there's a growing chance that they'll default, which will be even worse. So what Ruto is sort of proposing is that they have a range of tax packages that will sort of raise the amount of revenue raised. So in terms of Kenya's tax profile, they are kind of middle of the pack compared to other African countries. So Kenya is the green line, and that tax to GDP ratio is about 15.3%. So they've got some wiggle room to raise their taxes and not be too far ahead of other African countries. Even compared to the OECD, the level of tax to GDP ratio is almost like half, or pretty much under half of what the OECD countries collect in terms of that tax to GDP ratio profile. So there's a bit of wiggle room for Kenya. Probably their corporate taxes are pretty similar to the OECD. Social security could be a potential point where they can collect more taxes. Kenya's economy is not doing that great, so I can see the pressure against the policy of raising taxes, but really, I think the alternative of falling into of defaulting is much worse, because then there'll be even more pressure for people to sort of cut back, and it might really push the economy down because they'll be struggling to get investors because they've defaulted. So maybe this is a case of short-term pain for long-term gain. So we'll keep watching this space and see how that goes. So the next story is Nigeria. So there's two stories that I want to talk about in regards to Nigeria. This one is linked to the next story. First is that Nigeria has commissioned the Dangote refinery. This is really big news for Nigeria, which is an oil-producing country, but it does not refine its own oil. And that means it has to import its oil from other countries for consumption and production uses. So what does that mean? So they have to import oil for you to put in your car. They have to import oil for you people to put in their trucks and vehicles and the like, which is bad considering that oil prices have skyrocketed because of this Ukraine-Russia conflict. So instead of Nigeria making a mozza like the UAE or other oil-producing countries, they're struggling despite having probably the best time for any oil-producing country. So this is really good news for the country, but the devil's in the details. It seems like there's an agreement that Dangote will make sure that he prioritizes providing oil to the Nigerian population, then any excess oil will be sold overseas. But is that in writing? I'm not sure. But it'll be interesting to see how those dynamics play out in terms of how that sort of affects the other industry players in the market, especially the small refineries. It's kind of like they're creating a monopoly really with a private entity. So we'll see how that plays out. And linked to that is a big announcement from the new president of Nigeria, Mr. Tinubu, who's saying that they're going to remove the fuel subsidy. So with Nigeria importing refined oil for different purposes, like cars and for production and supply trucks, one of the things that the government had was a fuel subsidy to so that they could bring down the cost of PMS, which is or petrol or those petroleum products. One of the effects of that announcement is that people have already started queuing, anticipating shortages or price hikes that could happen over time. So it's an interesting time for Nigeria in terms of if they remove this subsidy, the thinking is that they can use that money that they spend on this subsidy to build the economy in different ways, maybe more on education, more on healthcare and the like. But the devil is in the details here, because how you remove that subsidy without causing inflation, without causing mass panic, is something that needs to be addressed. And also getting agreement from other stakeholders, because this is not the first time they've tried to remove subsidy. There have been other attempts before. The most sort of recent failed attempt was that in November 2021, the federal government tried to remove the subsidy and replace it with a $5,000 transport grant for poor Nigerians. I have some issues with this because they haven't done a census in a while, and I don't think their systems for knowing which household is poor, which household is not poor, is really good, and how they roll that amount, that $5,000 grant, and how to make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong pockets is something that's a question mark to me. So I'm glad that that did not go through, because it probably might have made the situation even worse. Mr. Tinubu has a real big chance here. If he can figure this out and make it go smoothly without any issues, he'll probably put a lot of confidence around his government and around his own competency as the new leader of Nigeria. So we'll see how this goes. We'll keep watch on this space, which will be an interesting one. And the last story that I want to look at, which might seem a little bit out of topic with us looking at African economic issues, is this about South Korea and its issue around not having enough people to work. So I'll just give you a little bit of context. So South Korea has an aging population problem, plus people are overworked. So people are working more than 60 hours per week, which is quite a lot, and it's putting a lot of strain on people who are trying to manage family and career life, especially women who are trying to do those things. And also, South Korea has got one of the most expensive, is one of the most expensive places to raise kids. So the cost of raising a child is 7.79 times the gross GDP per capita. So what gross GDP per capita is simply like how much money, if you divide the number of the total GDP by the total population, how much money each person sort of on average gets in that country. So they're saying it's 7.79 times that. So if you earn 100,000, it's 700,000, 790,000 or something like that to raise a child. The next most expensive country is China. Then we've got Germany and France as well, just to give you perspective. So the number of people being born, the number of births of the fertility rate in South Korea is around 0.78, which is quite low. Typically, you want your birth rate to be around 2.1. So that kind of makes sure that you have enough people replacing those who are sort of aging and dying. So the way to think about this is, imagine if you had a company of 100 people and then 50 people decided to retire, and you only get 20 people coming in to fill those jobs. You have now got 70 people doing the work of 100 people, which is a problem. And to add pain to misery is that that company also has to support those 50 people who have retired as well. So that's kind of the dynamics that is happening in the economy. So one way they can sort of solve this problem, other than sort of trying to do this flexible work arrangement, which seems to be unpopular already, is to get migrants to come and work. And one of the biggest assets that Africa has is that we've got a lot of people who are unemployed or underemployed. So this is really about thinking about how strategically Africans can sort of see the pain points of not just the Eastern countries such as the South Koreas and the Chinas, but the Americas, the UKs, because we already know that many people are migrating from Africa to UKs and the Europes to get better job opportunities, and they really need those skills because there's not enough workers, because many of the people in their workplaces are sort of coming to that age of retirement. So really, if we're strategic about this, what we could do is find a way of how can we solve this pain point for these Eastern and Western countries, but also get a really good deal out of them. Could we make something that, you know, people go there for 5 years, they also provide us investment, they set up companies here. Imagine having a Samsung or one of those tech companies coming into Africa and setting up shop because of strategic deals between governments. That would be really great. It will really boost our tech skills, or really boost other skills, maybe agriculture. It could be different things that could be in the deal. So it's all about strategic thinking. So I think this is this is an interesting story to me. It might be interesting for you guys to think about how Africa could build itself up. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to make more videos like this in the weeks to come. And if you liked it, make sure you hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe as well. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.